Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Friday, February 6th, 2026. And today we're doing something that feels a little meta.
A little self-referential, maybe.
Exactly. Usually, we take this big stack of articles about what's happening out there in the markets, in tech, big geopolitical shifts. We're always looking through the window at the world.
Right.
But today, we're stopping. We're going to look at the glass itself. We're analyzing the actual lens that we all use to see reality.
Which is, it's such a necessary calibration. If the lens you're looking through is cracked or if it's dirty or warped in some way, it almost doesn't matter what's actually happening on the other side. You're going to get a distorted image regardless.
And if you're making decisions based on that distorted image,
you're making bad decisions. For your life, for your business, for your country. It's fundamental.
It is. And the source material we're working with today is a heavy hitter. It's a manifesto. I really think that's the only word for it. It's titled News Needs to be Reimagined, and it's written by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat on the Democracy for Nepal blog.
And I want to start with a question that the author poses right near the beginning. It sounds so simple, almost childish, but the more I sat with it this morning, getting my coffee, the more it completely unraveled me.
Okay.
The question is, what is news?
It is the fundamental question, isn't it? And if you ask most people, they'll give you a kind of dictionary definition about current events or important happenings.
Sure, something you'd read in a textbook.
But if you actually look at how we as a society answer that question, not with our words, but with our behavior, with our clicks, our attention, our ad dollars, the answer is actually, well, it's quite disturbing.
It's very disturbing. The source argues that we have, without really talking about it, collectively decided that news is synonymous with crisis.
Yes.
It's conflict, it's outrage, it's fear. The author uses this phrase that it really stuck with me. He's updating that old industry slogan. It's not just, if it bleeds, it leads anymore.
No, there's a second and third part now.
There is.
Okay.
It's, if it bleeds, it leads. If it enrages, it spreads. If it divides, it clicks. And that evolution is so critical to understand. The old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, that came from the era of television and newspapers.
The fight for the front page.
Exactly. It was about grabbing your attention on a newsstand or making you stop flipping channels. But this edition, if it enrages, it spreads. That's the modern algorithmic twist.
That's the social media layer.
That is the engine of the last 15 years. And the source is pointing out something profound. We have internalized this definition so deeply that we now equate the feeling of being informed with the feeling of being anxious.
That's the part that hit me the hardest. It's a psychological trap. I had this moment of self-reflection reading this, and I realized that if I wake up and I scroll through my feed and I don't feel that spike of cortisol, if I'm not immediately worried about a war or a new virus or some political scandal, I actually feel like I'm not doing my job.
Like you're being irresponsible.
Yes, like I'm being irresponsible or naive or that I'm somehow missing the real story.
That is the exact mechanism the source identifies. It's a conditioned response.
Yeah.
We've been trained systematically by the media architecture around us to believe that the only information that is relevant is threat information.
Threat information.
It's evolutionary biology hijacked by modern technology. It's brilliant in how insidious it is. You need to know if a tiger is coming.
Of course. That's a basic survival instinct.
Right. If there's a predator in the tall grass, you need to know about it immediately. Your brain is wired to prioritize that information above everything else. Ignoring the tiger is a very bad survival strategy.
The worst, probably.
But what happens when the media architecture is designed to present everything as a tiger? Every policy change is a tiger. Every tweet from a politician is a tiger. Every market dip, every celebrity gaffe. It's all presented with the same level of existential urgency.
You end up living in a state of chronic, low-level fight or flight.
That's it, exactly. You're constantly scanning the horizon for threats that may or may not exist, may or may not affect you. Your nervous system is just fried.
And the source has a name for this. It calls it modern media logic, and it creates this distortion field. We start to believe that the world is exclusively made of problems. It's like we're all wearing glasses that are designed to filter out everything except danger.
Right.
But, and this is the pivot point for our whole discussion today, Bhagat posits this really radical alternative. He says, very simply, news need not be negativity.
And that is the thesis. That's the jumping off point. So I think for the next hour or so, what we should do is really deconstruct this anxiety engine that we've all built and are living inside of.
Okay.
And then We're going to look at the blueprint this source lays out for a completely different kind of news ecosystem.
Yeah.
One that is honest, one that's complete, and this is the really surprising part one that's actually commerce-driven.
Yeah, that part really threw me for a loop when I first read it.
Me too.
Yeah.
But in a way that he argues solves problems rather than just creating them.
It's a journey. It goes from the philosophical, the why, all the way down to the highly practical, here's the business model. So let's stay on the diagnosis for a moment longer. Why are we so susceptible to this? Why do we, as consumers, buy into the idea that good news isn't real news? Because it's true. If I tell someone I read a great story about a new park opening up,
They look at you like you're a child.
they do. They look at me like I'm wasting their time with fluff.
The source argues it's because we've fundamentally confused loudness with importance.
Loudness with importance. Say more about that.
Well, according to the text, there is, and I'm quoting here, immense positivity unfolding across the world every single day. But notice the adjectives the author uses to describe it.
Quietly, steadily, and often invisibly.
Invisibly. I mean, what a word choice for a news environment. Media is a visual medium. It's about what you can show. How do you show something that's invisible?
That's a real paradox.
It is. And I think it helps to think about the nature of destruction versus construction. This is almost a physics problem as much as it is a media problem. Destruction is loud, it's fast, it's cinematic. You can burn down a bridge in an hour. That makes for compelling video. It makes for a great simple headline. Bridge collapses. You can see the smoke, you can hear the crunch.
It's an event. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it demands your attention right now.
Yes. But what about building the bridge?
Well, that takes years. Decades sometimes.
It takes years. It involves countless community meetings, engineering diagrams, pouring concrete, and then waiting for it to dry, safety inspections. I mean, it is, frankly, incredibly boring to watch in real time.
You can't put a 247 webcam on concrete drying and call it news.
You can. It's slow. It's methodical. The source calls this the cumulative nature of progress. And I want to linger on that phrase. Progress is rarely explosive. It is cumulative.
Progress is cumulative. That is such a key insight because it explains the whole blind spot.
It explains everything. Our news cycle is built for explosions, not for accumulation. We operate on a 24-hour cycle. Or, let's be honest, it's more like a 24-second cycle now with social media feeds.
Right, the refresh rate is constant.
And cumulative change just doesn't fit into that container. It's the wrong shape. So we have this massive, massive blind spot in our perception of reality. We are missing half the data of what is actually happening in the world because that data is moving too slowly for our cameras to capture it effectively.
So because it's boring to watch or because it happens incrementally, piece by piece, we assume it's not happening. Is that the art?
Where we assume it doesn't matter. We relegate it to the background. We assume it's just background noise.
The hum of the refrigerator.
That's a perfect analogy. It's the hum of the refrigerator. But that background noise is actually civilization functioning. It's the sound of society working.
The source has this list of these invisible things. It says, communities solving problems, individuals showing grace under pressure, small acts of courage.
Yeah.
And, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Please.
Because I can just hear the serious old school journalists rolling their eyes at that list. They'd say, that's fluff. That's the cat stuck in the tree story. We have a journalistic duty to report on the corruption, the wars, the fires. That's what holding power to account means.
Of course. And the source anticipates that cynicism. It's a very common, almost reflexive critique. And this is where the argument gets really, really sharp.
Okay.
Fagat argues that dismissing positivity as soft or unserious isn't a sign of rigorous thinking. It actually reveals a deep flaw in our own intellect.
A flaw in our intellect. How so?
It suggests that we believe that entropy, that chaos and decay, is the only fundamental truth of the universe. It's a profoundly pessimistic worldview.
Let me use an analogy. If you look at a garden and you only report on the weeds,
right,
and you write story after story about the aphids and the blight and the dry soil, and you never ever mention the tomatoes and the cucumbers that are actually growing, are you being a hard-hitting reporter? Or are you just lying by omission? You're distorting reality. You're giving the farmer a completely false report on the state of his own land. He'd think everything is failing.
Precisely. The source says, and this is another quote that I think is so important, hope does not trend easily, but it sustains societies. If the fundamental job of journalism is to reflect reality, and reality includes the things that sustain society, the acts of cooperation, the problem solving, the slow building, then ignoring those things is a fundamental failure of journalism. It's not fluff to report on the structural integrity of the building. We only call it news when the building falls down. That is an editorial bias. It's a choice.
It's a choice to focus on failure instead of function.
Yes.
Let's dig into the specific examples the source gives because I think they're so powerful. They're not cat-in-the-tree stories at all. They are deeply structural stories that just happen to be constructive instead of destructive. I want to really unpack these because they help visualize what reimagined news could actually look like.
Let's do it.
The first one is a farmer experimenting with sustainable practices.
Right. Now, in the current model, this is a niche story. If it gets covered at all, it's in an agricultural trade magazine that, maybe 3,000 people read.
Or a Sunday morning human interest segment that lasts for 2 minutes.
Right. It's not news with a capital N.
Yeah.
It is not on the homepage of the New York Times or leading the broadcast on CNN. But the source asks, why? Why isn't it?
Yeah, let's really sit with that. Why isn't it?
Consider the actual stakes of that story.
Right.
That one farmer on their piece of land is essentially running research and development for the survival of the human species.
Wow. Okay, frame it that way.
I mean, they are figuring out how to keep food yields up while the climate is changing, how to preserve topsoil, which is disappearing at an alarming rate globally, how to manage water scarcity. If they succeed, and if that knowledge is shared and spreads, we all eat in the year 2050.
And if they fail?
If they fail, or more importantly, if nobody learns about their success and just stays on their farm, we face systemic food shortages. Famine.
When you put it like that, it seems like the stakes are infinitely higher than whatever insult a politician threw on Twitter this morning.
Infinitely higher.
Oh.
But the politician's insult is conflict. It's instant. It's loud. It triggers the tribal, emotional part of our brain.
And it fits into a 280-character box.
Perfectly. The farmer's experiment, on the other hand, is maybe a 5-year cycle to see results. It's cumulative. So we are systematically ignoring the long-term survival story to focus on the short-term soap opera. We are prioritizing the noise over the signal every single time.
Okay, here's another one from the text. A teacher transforming a classroom with limited resources.
Again, let's think about the scale and the framing. We love to cover the crisis in education. We are obsessed with it.
Absolutely. Failing test scores, crumbling infrastructure, budget cuts.
All of which are real problems and deserve coverage. The source isn't saying we should ignore those things. But when a teacher, in the middle of all that crisis, actually cracks the code.
What do you mean cracks the code?
They figure out a new way to teach math. They figure out how to get 30 kids from disadvantaged backgrounds reading at grade level despite having no budget, despite the crumbling school building. That is not just a nice story. That is a breakthrough.
It's a technological and social breakthrough.
Yes. If that story is told correctly, it's not just a feel-good piece designed to make you cry for a minute. It's a blueprint. It's a replicable model that thousands of other teachers in similar situations can adopt and use. It's technology transfer.
But we don't frame it that way.
Never. We frame it as, oh, look at this wonderful, saintly teacher. We treat it as a heartwarming anecdote. And in doing so, we strip it of its professional and systemic value. We treat it as a personal story of heroism rather than what it is, critical industry intelligence.
I really like that framing, critical industry intelligence. It gives the story weight, it demands respect.
It's a different way of seeing.
Okay, what about this one? A startup quietly improving healthcare access in a small town.
This one strikes right at the heart of our obsession with the unicorn model of business news. We only seem to care about startups if they're valued at $1 billion or more.
Or if the CEO is a charismatic genius.
Or if the CEO is committing massive fraud, like a Theranos situation. We are only interested in the absolute extremes of wealth or crime.
Right. If it's not a flashy IPO or a dramatic jail sentence, it doesn't count as business news.
Exactly. But a company that develops, say, a better scheduling and triage app for understaffed rural clinics, or a new logistics network for delivering temperature-sensitive insulin to remote areas.
Things that actually save lives.
They are actively improving the quality of life and the length of life for thousands of people. It's a massive impact story. It is solving a real market inefficiency. But because there's no scandal and there's no billion-dollar valuation, it's invisible to the national media.
It doesn't fit the narrative of what a startup story is supposed to be.
The source argues that this quiet improvement is the actual engine of the economy. It's the real work. But our news radar is tuned only to the casino aspect of capitalism, not the construction aspect.
And the last example from this section of the text, This one really, for me, defines the whole concept of resilience. It's a neighborhood organizing itself after a flood without waiting for saviors.
And pay close attention to that phrasing, without waiting for saviors. That is crucial.
Why?
Because think about how these stories are normally covered. The news cameras arrive with the floodwaters. They show the devastation. They find the person crying on their rooftop.
The most dramatic shot.
The most dramatic shot. They interview the politician who flies in for the photo op and promises that aid is on the way. They frame the citizens entirely as passive victims.
And we, the audience, watch and we feel pity and maybe a little bit of fear that it could happen to us.
Exactly, pity and fear.
Huh.
Then a few days later, the water recedes and the cameras leave because the event is over. The loud part is done.
But that's when the real story actually begins.
Precisely. The cleanup. The neighbors checking on the elderly. The shared meals in the church basement. The complex logistics of rebuilding homes and lives. The painful, tedious negotiation with insurance companies. The source argues that this is the story.
The recovery.
The recovery. The resilience. This is how civilization actually survives. It survives because neighbors help neighbors. It survives through small-scale, decentralized cooperation. And by framing these people not as passive victims waiting for a government truck, but as active agents rebuilding their own community. You change the entire narrative of the nation. You show people that they have agency.
And if we ignore that phase, if our cameras only show the flood and the crying,
then we teach the audience helplessness. We teach them that disaster is inevitable and that recovery is impossible unless some powerful person from the capital city comes to save you. It's a profoundly disempowering narrative. It creates a population that feels small and fragile and dependent.
which brings us back to that quote you mentioned earlier.
Yes. To show the grace in day-to-day life is not to lower journalistic standards. It is to raise them.
I circled that line 3 times in my notes, raise them. Because it feels harder, doesn't it? It is so much harder to find the compelling narrative in the slow, painstaking cleanup than it is to find the story in the dramatic crash.
It requires more journalistic rigor. It's easier to be a stenographer for conflict. To tell the resilience story, you have to understand sociology and logistics and local economics. You have to spend time with people when they aren't at their most emotional peak, when they aren't screaming.
Right.
You have to listen to the boring details about drywall and mold remediation to find the universal story of human resilience. It truly humanizes the subject. The current model often treats people as props in a tragedy. This reimagined model would treat them as protagonists in a drama of recovery.
That's a perfect segue because that brings us to the next pillar of this manifesto, which is called the power of the ordinary. This feels like it moves from the practical into something a bit more philosophical.
It does.
The source talks about our cultural obsession with the extraordinary and how that obsession has blinded us to the beauty of the everyday.
We live in the extremes now, on the edges of the bell curve. Social media has poured gasoline on this fire. On your feed, you only see the most perfect curated vacation or the most terrible, gut-wrenching disaster.
Nobody posts about their Tuesday.
Nobody posts about their Tuesday. I love that. And yet, Tuesday is 90% of life. The source tries to give voice to that Tuesday. It lists these profound meanings that are hidden in ordinary life. The first one is people going to work.
It sounds so mundane. Man goes to work. That's not a headline.
It's not. But step back and think about what it actually represents. The sheer level of coordination, of discipline, of trust, of contribution to the economy. Millions upon millions of people getting up, getting dressed, and collaborating to keep the lights on, the water running, the shelves stocked. It is an absolute miracle of social cooperation.
But we just take it for granted until it breaks, like during the pandemic when supply chains snapped.
Exactly. We only notice it in its absence. The next one is parents raising children.
Again, seems private, not news.
But is it? The literal future of the human species is being nurtured and shaped in living rooms and kitchens, mostly invisibly. It is arguably the single most important job in the world, and yet in the news, it's treated as a private hobby, not a public good.
And then artists creating without applause.
Oh, this one really hits home in the influencer age we live in.
Yeah.
We've completely conflated value with views. We've equated worth with likes.
If you paint a picture and nobody likes it on Instagram, did it even happen?
That's the question our culture is asking. The source pushes back and reminds us that the act of creation, the act of adding something to the culture, is valuable in and of itself. It is the persistence of the human spirit.
And the last one on this list, citizens navigating change with dignity.
To me, that might be the most powerful one, navigating change with dignity. Think about all the change we go through constantly. Economic shifts, technological disruption, political turmoil, personal loss. The fact that society doesn't collapse into total chaos every single day is a testament to that quiet internal dignity. To report on that dignity is to restore balance to our view of what humanity is.
It effectively flips the entire lens of the camera, and that's the title of the next section, Flipping the Lens. The source is very, very specific about who the current protagonists of the news are.
It's a very short and exclusive list, isn't it?
Yeah.
Politicians, celebrities, billionaires, and now influencers.
That's pretty much it, the 0.01% of the population.
And we track their movements, their feuds, their purchases, like they are gods on Mount Olympus in the Iliad.
Meanwhile, the invisible majority, the source's term for the people actually holding society together, they are nowhere to be found.
Or if they are there, they're just the backdrop. They are the blurry extras in the movie about the main character's life.
So how do we actually flip this? The source suggests some concrete steps. Spotlight everyday problem solvers and treat citizens as protagonists. But what does that look like in practice? Is it just more of those human interest stories? Because like we said, we see those sometimes, but they often feel light, insubstantial.
No, and that is a crucial distinction to make. A traditional human interest story is usually treated as a dessert.
A palate cleanser.
A palate cleanser, exactly. A little sweet thing after the real news of war and politics.
Yeah.
This is different. This is about making the citizen the driver of the main narrative.
Okay, give me an example.
So instead of reporting on a new healthcare law by interviewing 3 senators who voted on it and a professional pundit who has an opinion on it,
The standard cable news panel.
standard panel, instead of that, you report on the law by following a nurse in a rural clinic who actually has to implement it.
Yeah.
Or you follow a patient with a chronic illness who has to navigate the new bureaucracy. You view the system from the user interface, not from the admin panel in Washington.
Because the user interface is where reality actually happens. The law might say one thing on paper, but the reality for people is what happens in that clinic.
Exactly. And when you, as a viewer or a reader, start to see your own life reflected in the news, not just the lives of the super elite, something chemical starts to happen to the relationship between the media and the audience.
What's that?
The source calls it the creation of connective tissue.
Which is another word for trust.
It's trust. Right now, media is a distant megaphone. That's the phrase used. It shouts at you from a fancy studio in a capital city. If I only ever talk to you about people you will never meet, living in mansions you will never enter, dealing with power struggles you can't possibly influence, why should you trust me? I'm not describing your world.
It's alienating.
It's completely alienating. But if I start reporting on the struggle to find affordable childcare, or the rising price of diapers, or the way your local park was finally cleaned up by a neighborhood association, now we are in the same room. Now the news is actually useful to you. It's about your life.
You know, it connects to that crisis of loneliness and polarization that we talk about all the time. It is much harder to hate a whole group of people if you see them on the news struggling with the same ordinary problems that you are.
It shatters the caricature. The old model, if it divides, it clicks, relies on othering people, on making them into a monstrous one-dimensional version of themselves.
Right.
The source implies a new metric. Could be possible. Maybe. If it connects, it builds.
If it connects, it builds. That's a powerful mantra for a new kind of media. But, okay, now we have to be the cynical realists for a second.
It's our job.
We have to talk about the money. Because everything we've just described, this deep, rigorous, on-the-ground reporting about ordinary people solving complex problems, that sounds incredibly expensive.
It is expensive. Far more expensive than having 2 people yell at each other in a studio.
And the current business model of news is barely keeping the lights on as it is. We see newsrooms shutting down every week. It's a race to the bottom.
It is. And this brings us to the economic pivot section of the text. And honestly, for me, this is the most structural and maybe the most radical part of the entire argument.
I agree.
The source states it very bluntly. The ad-driven model of news is broken.
Okay, we all kind of know it's broken, but let's be very specific about why it fails this particular vision we've been outlining. Why can't we just have banner ads next to the good news stories?
Because of the deep structure of the incentives. The advertising model does not sell value. It doesn't sell insight. It sells one thing, attention, eyeballs on a screen.
Right.
And as we established right at the top of this conversation, the cheapest, fastest, most efficient way to capture eyeballs is to trigger the amygdala, the fear center of the brain. Fear, anger, lust, outrage.
And outrage is cheap to produce. All you need is a hot take and a keyboard. Nuance, on the other hand, is incredibly expensive to produce. You need a research team, a travel budget, editors, fact-checkers.
Correct. So in a purely ad-driven marketplace, sensationalized news will always, always outcompete thoughtful news because it has a lower cost of production and a much higher viral coefficient. Outrage outperforms nuance, as the source says. It's a simple economic reality. We're in a race to the bottom where we are literally strip mining the mental health of the audience for pennies per click.
So Pagat proposes a radical alternative, a commerce-driven news model. Now, when I first read that word commerce, I'll be honest, I flinched.
We could.
I immediately thought, oh, great, more sponsored content, more pop-up ads, more selling out. But that's not what he's talking about at all, is it?
Not even close. He's talking about utility. He's talking about creating what he calls the everything layer. This is a fascinating concept. The core idea is this. What if news wasn't just something you passively consumed and then felt bad about? What if it was a tool you actively used to interact with the world and improve your situation?
Okay, let's walk through the scenarios the text lays out, because this is where the abstract idea becomes really concrete. I want you, our listeners, to really visualize this interface. Scenario A is housing.
Okay. So let's look at the old model first, the one we live in now. You read an article titled, "Rents are skyrocketing and the housing market is doomed."
I think I read that exact article this morning.
We all did. It's filled with sad stats and quotes from desperate people. You read it, you get that familiar knot in your stomach, you start worrying about your own lease, and then you close the tab. End of interaction.
You're informed, but you're also completely helpless.
You're informed and helpless. And the publisher made, what, maybe 0.3 of a cent from the banner ad you subconsciously ignored? You leave feeling worse and they barely made any money. It's a lose-lose.
A terrible transaction.
A terrible transaction. Now, the reimagined model. You read a rigorously reported story about the housing crisis. It breaks down the problem, the zoning laws, the supply shortages. But then, integrated directly into that same platform is the everything layer.
What does that look like?
Maybe the article features a company that's building innovative, affordable, modular accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Right there in the article is a button where you can request a quote or see if your own property is zoned for one.
Okay, I'm following.
Or maybe there's a link to a tenants' rights legal collective where you can book a cheap consultation. Maybe there's a marketplace to find vetted local roommates to help split costs. Maybe there is a one-click tool to sign a petition to your city council regarding zoning laws. The information is paired with action.
So the news tells me, here's the problem. But then it immediately hands me a toolkit with a bunch of hammers I can use to start fixing it for myself.
And this is the crucial economic kicker. If you click that button and you end up buying that modular home, or you hire the lawyer through the platform, or you subscribe to the legal service, the news platform takes a small transaction fee, a referral fee.
And that fee is worth way more than the banner ad.
Infinitely more. And look what just happened. You've completely flipped the incentives. The news outlet now makes more money if they help you solve your problem than if they just scare you about it.
Wow. They are now financially incentivized to find and feature the solutions.
They're incentivized to find the farmer with the sustainable practices and connect you to their products. They're incentivized to find the startup improving healthcare and connect you to their services. Why? Because those stories lead to productive economic activity. Stories about the end of the world do not generate economic activity, they generate paralysis. If you believe the world is ending tomorrow, why would you buy a modular home?
That's a brilliant point. Despair is actually bad for business in this model.
It is. Cynicism is a terrible customer. Agency, or at least the potential for agency, is a great customer.
Okay, let's apply this to scenario B, education. How does it work there?
Same logic. You read an in-depth article about the growing gap in AI literacy in the workforce. In the old model, you just panic that robots are coming for your job and you feel obsolete.
Another knot in the stomach.
Another knot. In the everything layer model, the article is paired with a curated, vetted list of online certification courses for the exact skills it's talking about. The message becomes, here is the problem. You don't know enough about AI. Here's the solution. This specific course can teach you, and you can enroll right there.
And maybe it also links you to buy the textbook from a local bookstore, or find a tutor in your area, or join a digital study group.
Exactly. The news becomes the gateway to upskilling. It's no longer just a platform for information consumption. It's a platform for personal and professional development.
Okay, scenario C, climate. This feels like the big one. Climate news is the ultimate paralysis engine right now. It often just feels like the ice caps are melting, the world is on fire, good luck.
It is the definition of a problem so big it makes you feel helpless. The new model would still report on the melting ice caps. Absolutely. The source is clear. Truth is paramount. You don't hide the bad news.
Honest completeness.
Honest completeness. But it would also report on the coffee company that has a new, verifiable method for preserving rainforests. And it would let you subscribe to buy that coffee right there in the feed. It would report on new community solar projects and have a button to let you sign up for a panel. It would connect you to the circular economy, the repair shops, the clothing swaps happening in your own city.
It integrates the marketplace for solutions directly into the reporting. It transforms the audience from being passive observers of doom into active participants in solutions.
And that brings us to what the source calls monetizing attention without exploitation. It notes this great paradox of our time. Attention is abundant. We are glued to our screens. We consume more media than any humans in history.
But trust is scarce.
Trust is scarce. We don't believe half of what we see. So the opportunity isn't to squeeze more ads into the last remaining pixels on the screen. The opportunity is to build an ecosystem where value flows both ways.
The value proposition completely shifts.
Completely. In the old ad-driven model, the user is the product. The news outlet's real customer is the advertiser, and they are selling the user's attention to that advertiser. In this new model, the user is the customer. The news outlet is providing genuine value to the user insight, agency, opportunity, and the user then chooses to transact through the platform.
The source lists out the potential revenue streams, subscriptions, and memberships, sure, but also microtransactions, local services, marketplaces, and then it mentions this one, AI-driven personalization aligned with user intent. We need to unpack that.
We do.
Because when I hear AI personalization today, I think of an algorithm that figures out I have a weakness for watching people fall off skateboards and then shows me an infinite feed of exactly that.
That is optimization for engagement.
Yeah.
That's the AI's goal.
Yeah.
Maximize your time on device. That is the old world. The source is talking about something different. Optimization for intent.
What's the difference?
Imagine an AI that knows, based on your reading history and explicit inputs, that you were trying to buy your first house, or that you're trying to get a handle on local politics, or that you're trying to reduce your family's carbon footprint. It knows your goals.
My goals, not just my mindless impulses.
Exactly. So when it curates the news for you, its goal is not to keep you scrolling mindlessly for hours. Its goal is to help you achieve your stated intent. This user wants to understand the nuances of the Middle East conflict.
So instead of showing me the most inflammatory, rage-inducing opinion piece just to get a reaction,
It gives you a concise history primer. It gives you an interactive map. It gives you 3 well-reasoned articles from different credible perspectives. It treats you like an adult with a goal, not like a lab rat with a dopamine button to be mashed.
it's a fundamental shift from a business model of extraction to one of empowerment.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. And that brings us right to the conclusion of Fagat's argument. It's the redefinition of what news is even for. He proposes a new triad for what news should do.
Okay, what is it?
Number 1, news should inform, yes, but it must also inspire.
It should reveal problems, but it must also illuminate pathways forward. And number 3, it should reflect reality in its full color, not just in shades of fear.
Illuminate pathways forward. That is the piece that is almost entirely missing from our current diet. We have thousands of high-powered flashlights pointing at every monster in the room. We have almost no flashlights pointing at the exits.
That is a perfect metaphor. That's exactly right. And the source is very careful. And I think this is so vital for our listeners to hear. This isn't about naive optimism. This is not toxic positivity where we just pretend everything is fine and ignore injustice.
Right. It's not about pretending the house isn't on fire while the flames are looking at the door.
No. The source has a name for it. Honest completeness. It explicitly acknowledges, quote, "The world is complex, imperfect, and painful. We can't ignore that. Wars happen. Corruption is real. People suffer. But the world is also creative, resilient, and full of quiet brilliance."
Both are true at the same time.
Both are true. To report only on the pain is, by definition, an incomplete report. It's a lie of omission. To report on the pain and the resilience, the problem, and the problem solvers, that is to finally tell the whole truth.
Listening to this whole argument laid out, it really forces you to audit your own media diet. I'm sitting here thinking about the apps on my phone. They're all designed for the old world. They are, as you said, anxiety engines.
They are. And until the platforms themselves change their business models, which is a huge undertaking, The burden really falls on us, the learners, to curate our own experience, to build our own lens.
So what does that look like practically? I mean, the source is a manifesto for the media industry, but what's the instruction manual for the user? How do we apply this in our lives today, right now?
It comes down to agency. It's about recognizing that you vote with your attention. Every single time you click on a rage bait headline about something outrageous, someone said, you are casting a financial vote for the anxiety engine. You are telling the algorithm, more of this, please. I enjoy being angry.
That's a tough pill to swallow. That my own click is the currency. I'm part of the supply chain.
We all are. It's the system we're in. But the reverse is also true. If you consciously seek out the quiet brilliance, if you find and subscribe to the one newsletter that only covers solutions, if you spend 10 minutes reading the story about your local school board instead of the national scandal, you are signaling a new kind of demand.
And we can try to create the everything layer for ourselves. When you read about a problem, you could make it a habit to open a new tab and ask, who is working to solve this?
Yes.
If the article doesn't give you the solution, go find it yourself.
Yeah.
Be the bridge between information and action. Don't let yourself stop at that feeling of helplessness.
Don't just consume, use the news. Turn it from a passive feed into an active tool.
News need not be negativity. It's just a simple sentence, but after this whole discussion, it feels revolutionary.
It feels like a permission slip. A permission slip to opt out of the misery cycle. You don't have to be miserable to be an informed citizen. It's possible to be informed and also inspired.
I want to leave the listener with a challenge. We've been talking for a while now, and my hope is that, for once, after a media discussion, your cortisol levels have actually gone down, not up.
That would certainly be a nice change of pace for the industry.
Here's the challenge. For the next week, I want you to be a conscious observer of your own information intake. Look back at the end of each day. You could even make a little note. What was the ratio? How much of what you consumed was emergency broadcast? The sky is falling. Be afraid. Be angry. And how much was quiet brilliance? People solving problems, building things, showing grace.
And just be honest with yourself. If that ratio is 90-10 or even 991 in favor of fear, you need to recognize that you are getting a dangerously distorted map of the world. And you're probably also emotionally exhausted.
So the challenge is to try and balance the scale, even a little. Find one story each day about the ordinary. The teacher, the farmer, the volunteer, the local startup. Read it. And if it's good, share it. Talk about it with a friend.
Validate it with your attention. Help it trend. Be the algorithm you want to see in the world.
Because as the source so beautifully reminds us, the world is not only falling apart. In many places, it is being patiently rebuilt, brick by brick.
And that, I think, is the news we all deserve to see.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. It's a different kind of subject for us, but I think a really necessary one. We'll be back next time with another stack of papers, and hopefully a slightly clearer lens to see them through. Stay curious.
And stay balanced.